Welcome to season 2 of the Human Design Profiles and Entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Chantel. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator, small business strategist, workshop facilitator, and the author of the Aligned Action series for solo entrepreneurs. Thanks for joining us today on this podcast, which is an active learning experiment all about how we experience entrepreneurship as individuals through our human design. Each episode profiles a human design enthusiast / business owner who is here to share about their introspection, how their personal profile lines have influenced their business journey, how they use what they know about their profiles to set intentions as entrepreneurs, and what this looks like for them personally in the implementation phase with the decisions that they make on a daily basis as business owners. Today, I'm connecting with Charlotte, a certified life coach and human design consultant. Through tailored guidance, Charlotte empowers ambitious business owners to embrace who they are and break free from societal expectations in both their life and their business. Have a listen while today's guest, Charlotte, a 2-4, shares her story while you read between the lines. Charlotte, you and I agree on probably lots of concepts, but one main concept of aligned business, that human design helps us to differentiate when it seems like everybody is trying to be the same. Can you expand on that and tell us about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I really feel like in my clients and in myself, something that I really struggled with, especially at the beginning stages of my business, was trying to do things like everybody else on Instagram, or how it was portrayed that how you should run a business, or how you should create content or show up on Instagram. Because every time I tried to do that, I was getting exhausted, or something in me just felt wrong. It just didn't feel like it fit for me. And I was disappointed by that. And I was, as I am, this type of person, is like, maybe there's another way of doing this. There's got to be a different way, because everyone is obviously different. So that's kind of where my path started and how I help my clients in that respect as well. I learned about human design around 4 years ago. My friend introduced me to human design. So I'd already started to integrate it into my life. So I understood how that was working for me in my life. But then getting deeper into entrepreneurship and seeing how things worked, there was moments where I was just like, this doesn't seem to be working for everybody. Sure, instead of everybody keep forcing themselves into this box all the time, surely we can use the elements of this to figure out a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember any of those first switches that you made for yourself in your own business based on your design?
I think a lot of it at the beginning was like things like boundaries, both for myself, honestly, like setting boundaries for myself about the amount that I was showing up or what I was doing in my downtime, and integrated parts of like, I don't have to keep forcing and pushing all the time, even when I'm tired. And certainly now, like my body tells me where we're getting to the end of the energy and it's time to pull back. Whereas before, obviously, I was continuing to push and then completely burning out and then having to pull back again. I think really at the beginning, it was boundaries for myself. And then after that, I feel like I've done a lot of mindset work as well around, it's okay to be different than everybody else. And at the beginning, it feels really daunting to try and have a different way of doing things when everyone is the same. But I think the more that you lean into it, anyone who's getting into human design or who understands human design, the more you lean into it, you start to see how things, and it works, right? So you start to notice and be like, oh, well, I'll keep going because I've seen that has helped me and I feel better.
Absolutely. I love that. As a 2-4, can you share with us what's your favorite way to be alone right now? And what communities on the 4-line side are feeling supportive for you?
So, as a 2-line, generally for me, it's something in nature. I love being outside. And if I'm not outside, I am sitting in a chair looking out of the window into the garden. I can do that for a long time and not do anything else, just sit and look out at the window. I love that. I am out of vision as well, just to add there. That's probably something
Me
to do
too.
with that. Um, but as a 2-line, often it's things like cooking by myself or doing yoga, or I just like to have my space. I think space for me is super important as a 2-line. The 4-line, something that I've definitely experimented more with is the type of communities I like to be involved in. And I'm not a three line, obviously, but I have tried different communities to see
Yeah,
if
that
they
makes
fit.
sense.
Yeah, because I think sometimes for me, I don't know until I'm in them. I'm very in sync with my body will tell me like this is not right or it doesn't feel right, or afterwards I'll feel tired.
Mm.
So for me, it's something like yoga kind of communities. I've tried many. Some of them don't fit. So going to a yoga class, which is kind of a supportive environment and the community feels supportive, I think is good for me. And online, I think having other people who are similar to you in terms of like profile or type is really important as well. I have a lot of projector friends.
I have talked to many people with different profiles, and I have noticed that two lines, especially, are really loving the online component. That's one of the patterns that I've uncovered in doing this show. That comes up again and again and again with two lines, no matter whether the two is in the conscious side or unconscious. The online community tends to feel more supportive.
It is interesting because potentially as a two line, you don't want to, reach out so far sometimes, and you still want to be in your own
Mm,
space, but you also want to connect with people sometimes. So
right.
yeah, I can see that because you literally can go onto your computer or your phone and you can test it if you want to, or you can, reach out to people that could potentially be a good fit.
Right. There's that element of safety there because
Mm,
you're still in your own space.
mm.
Mhm. So, in your human design coaching, how do you tend to guide two fours based on your own personal experience with that profile line?
Often when I meet two fours, I think it's finding the balance between the two and the four, honestly, as well is like a big part of it. I think when people come into design and they understand that there are two, they can definitely, especially because of the conscious side, they understand being a two, but they want to completely shut themselves off from the world and just be a hermit and that's it. And I think that doesn't work for two fours. I think there's work to do to understand that you've got to have the balance of the four as well. Because I see two lines often getting stuck when they completely hermit all the time.
Yeah, I can see
Um,
that.
yeah, it's almost like they're in the darkness and can't find their way out. But when
Mhm.
you bring in some of the four line stuff, it definitely helps. I think also, I definitely see this is like not the two line, the four line, but with the four line, I see a lot of people with resistance to community and networking because of maybe they've been burnt before or because of that two line element, right? Where they want to be by themselves and safe, like you said, and they don't want to network. But I think what I've done with my clients is change the idea of what networking is. And we don't have to call it networking. We can call it something completely different.
That's where that differentiation piece comes in because networking can look completely different
Mhm.
for every one of us.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't really like the networking where you go to, I just think of a conference, big room, lots of people. That is not my idea of fun, but I have found networking events that I've really enjoyed that have been very different to that.
I'm guessing a lot of your work does come through your network as a fourth line. Do you have some kind of referral system in place, or do you find that it works more organically?
I definitely have thought about referral systems before, but for me, whenever I get to the point of doing that, I feel like I'm playing too much with the energy and I like to keep it organic. Yes, I would say about honestly 90% plus of my clients come through my network,
Mhm.
um, through referrals, through people who've kind of like word of mouth, for example, through podcasts, through clients who've worked with me before. I also find as a four line, many of my clients stay around for a long time,
Mm,
years. So they might come back in and then leave and come back in and leave. That is definitely a theme for me as a four line.
that's a really interesting pattern. Yeah.
And they're always connected, which I find really interesting, especially in this day and age where everything moves so fast. I have people in my audience who've been there since the beginning and we still DM, we're still talking. They may have worked with me or not, but yeah, I really like that.
Let's go back to revisit the two line for a second. Which parts of the two line feel easy to embrace as part of your identity, and which parts feel more difficult to maybe accept or integrate?
Okay. So as a two line, I find it easy to be by myself. I really enjoy it. I've never been the type of person that needs to be around people. I love people. I really do. But I definitely enjoy my own space and I'm happy to be by myself. The other element of the two line that I find difficult is this, what I can only describe as like an imposter syndrome you get as a two line, that you just cannot see what your talents and gifts are. You can't really see what your skills are. You need somebody else to almost like, put it on a piece of paper and show you or tell you. You need that support. It's really interesting then when you think about being a two line and wanting to be by yourself. And this is why two lines struggle, I think. You're not getting any feedback about what you're good at. So you get deeper and deeper into this like darkness. You want to be by yourself, but then you're not seeing. So you get this imposter syndrome. Well, I'm not very good at anything, really. Whereas
Right.
everyone on the outside can see what you're good at because they see that you're a natural at these things. So another thing I find quite difficult is understanding what I'm natural at. And so I also need people sometimes to tell me what it is. I don't know.
Mhm.
So yeah, I definitely find like I liked being alone and never struggle with that, but the other elements of being a two line are quite difficult to navigate.
Hmm. Do you just ask someone who's close to you when you need that, or do you have any kind of rituals or routines set around that to figure that out?
Yeah, sometimes I ask. What I tend to do is look for evidence, is what I would call it. I look back at things where a client has said something, a friend has said something. What are people asking me all the time?
Mhm.
What are people commenting on? Those type of things. So when I'm getting into that dark place, I start to look for evidence. Okay, you think you're not good at anything. So what is the evidence? What do we have?
Yeah. I just finished writing a book called Simple Social Proof, and that factors into it a lot. Yes, you want the testimonials and the reviews to be able to show other people, but you also want them to show yourself.
Mm.
And I can see how that really applies to, say, two lines or projectors. That kind of reflection is important to see where you're meant to guide. I like the term evidence gathering very much because that is what it feels like for myself. I do revisit my testimonials every once in a while, especially if I'm going to be writing. I try to infuse client words in what I write. Reading that helps me put me back in a frame of mind where I feel more confident and more assured. And it always helps point me in the direction that I need to go. I
It's
love how
kind of
you said that.
interesting as a one line because you're looking to get that foundation, right? And
Absolutely.
your foundation is probably to do with the evidence that you've collected and looked at.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's very much a self-empowerment practice of mine to go back and look through. And as a result, I've always kept my testimonials really organized in a spreadsheet. I teach how to do
Mhm.
that in the book. Having them easily accessible makes it so easy to, when you need that little reminder of how you help and what you do, that it's right there and you can go and grab it whenever you need it.
I think it's so important, just such a simple tool to tap into, but people forget, I think, about having their testimonials. I'm
They
always
do.
on my clients, go and look, find the
Yeah,
evidence.
right. Yeah. I love that there's more of us out there giving that advice. And based on different elements of our design too, right? It's
Yeah,
always
absolutely.
interesting when we can find patterns among the different profile lines and we're still coming at similar things, but in different ways, maybe different
Mhm.
language around it or a different intention, but it all kind of aligns.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
So, as a projector running a business, what are some practical ways that you've decided to step out of that conditioning and align with your design instead?
I think for me, and I'm sure you know some projectors, for me, it's been a huge lesson learning in when to just lean back and just wait. And I know it's really difficult for projectors to do this waiting thing, like they see it as
Mhm.
such a negative, but honestly, once you do it, it just becomes like second nature. It's just, I would have been the type of person who I really like helping people. So if I see somebody repeating a pattern or doing something that I feel like I know the answer to, I would have jumped in, right? And then obviously that doesn't work for projectors because you've got that penetration and people are like, oh my God, this is too much. But now I just love to sit back and just see, because I also learn something from that. I also see how it's going for that person or how it's going to work out, and then I can learn something too. But I like to just lean back and see what's happening rather than try and instigate things. So that's been really important for me, and I actually really enjoy that now. I think also sometimes projectors can take the invitation as being quite literal for everything.
Mhm.
I see a lot of projectors getting stuck where they say, well, I can't create anything because I have to be invited. I can't do anything because I have to be invited. You don't have to be invited to be seen in the world or to do the things that you like or to start a business or create your services or have a website. You don't have to be invited to do that thing. From that place, the invitations come because you've got your services there or whatever. Another thing I see is projectors almost like hiding what they do. Like they're not forthcoming with, you can book with me this way. If you're a projector, I really suggest that you have like a link in your bio or something, a way someone can find you and talk to you, because otherwise you're not seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to attract a lot of other manifesting generators and a lot of projectors. My
Mhm.
clients tend to be one or the other. And I have seen that for sure with projector clients where we've had to work on that, not visibility in the sense that the online business world talks about it as, in sense of like getting PR and getting on podcasts and that kind of visibility, but more so just visibility of the tangible ways in which you work with people. So yeah, I hear you. How did you push past that, fight that impulse, and how do you work that into how you operate as a business owner?
Yeah, I think for me, it's all about like me sharing what I love to do. Something that I kind of realized a few years ago was that marketing is it's not really that I know people are funny about selling and marketing and pushing their opinion or showing what they do, etc. But if you reframe it to being like, well, this is what I love to do, and I'm just showing the world what I love to do, then that makes it completely different, because I just like doing what I like to do, and I like to make things also pretty, out of vision again. So I like having a website that looks a particular way, and then in there is my services. And now I don't have a problem with it. I find it quite easy actually, but I can certainly see how it can be difficult for projectors when they're first starting out, because it feels so unnatural to be
Mhm.
visible in that way. Yeah, I would definitely say if you enjoy doing something, you're just sharing it with the world. Don't take it so seriously. If you enjoy something, just put it out there.
That's a powerful reframe. I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah, I just try and see things as fun. I also try and imagine my childlike self of like, oh my God, I love this thing. Like I'm obsessed with dogs. I would have no issues like telling everybody. I tell everybody all the time that I love dogs. Oh my God, this dog, that dog, etc. So it's kind of the same thing, honestly.
That's true. We just can't get up in our heads about it.
Totally.
This is marketing, this is selling, this is how it's supposed to be, all of that. So, okay, you've mentioned outer vision a few times, and that's an element of my design too. And I love talking about that. So, selfishly, I'd love to ask you a little bit
Great.
about outer vision. One of the things I noticed as we've been speaking is you use the phrase I see a lot.
Mm.
And I have this little mini theory that honestly, I could do probably a whole other season or version of this show based on cognition and another one based on environment, essentially every one
Yes,
of those variables.
absolutely.
But I have this theory that we tend to speak using the senses of our cognition. And I've noticed it across the board. It's like a little vocal tick that we seem to
Ooh.
have. I speak that way too. I'm outer vision. I talk about things that I can see for my clients. I can see the journey. I can visualize. That
Mm.
kind of visual language is very front and center for me. You were talking about the aesthetics of I like to have a pretty website. Like, yeah, me too. And for a long time, I built those pretty websites for other people because that outer visual of how we present ourselves is something that's so integral to how I see the world of entrepreneurship for sure. How do you feel like Outer Vision shows up for you, and what have you learned about it that you want to share?
Oh my God, I love that. I mean, I didn't even, I do recognize now that I do say I see a lot. And right now, my window is in front of me and I can see the garden. And I like to have that. I like to be looking at something all the time. But it's definitely shown up with me in terms of aesthetic, like you say, in terms of how I do things in that respect. Even down to my email marketing, like I've tried other things, but I don't like it because I don't like the way it looks. It has to look a particular way, else I can't get on board with it.
Mhm,
So it shows up in every way for me. It shows up in my desk and how I have my desk set up. It shows up in, like you said, that when I see a client come to me and they tell me these things, I can see the pattern,
mhm,
and I can see where they're hoping to go. It's all visual, right? You can
mhm,
just picture that and how that looks. And also when I'm describing something, when I'm thinking about my business and how perhaps I might want to change things, I generally get the visuals first that I can
mhm,
see,
mhm.
map it out that way, do you know?
Yep.
And it's so strange because you can't really visualize a program, for example, or something like that, but you kind of can when you're out of it. Yeah. And I find for me, something that I had to let go of the conditioning around was feeling like I can, if you're watching this on YouTube, I look around quite a lot. I'm quite a visual person when I'm talking to people. I have eye contact, but I definitely look around a lot. And I didn't used to do that. I used to force myself to have
Mm,
the eye contact because that's the good thing to do. That's a professional thing to do. Whereas now
right.
I feel like I'm receiving stuff all the time. I must be receiving information when I'm looking around more.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm gonna have to play around with that. Now that you mention it, I'm going to pay attention.
Also, without a vision, I don't know if you found this too, my energy gets quite stagnant if I'm somewhere where there isn't windows or I don't like the look of the place, for example. I'm trying
Yes.
to think of somewhere, I've traveled a lot and I've traveled with my business, but if I've ended up in an Airbnb, which is not very nice, it's not good for me. It changes everything for me if I don't like the visuals.
Yeah, I a few weeks ago spent a day in a hotel ballroom in the basement.
Oh my God.
And although I enjoyed the event, it was an entire day long struggle for me to just
Mm.
exist in that space. And I was thinking about how I take for granted that one of the freedoms of entrepreneurship that I value the most is just the freedom to put myself in the space where I want to put myself. Like with a job, you often don't have that kind of freedom, right? I used to be a teacher and I was lucky that every room I wound up in had a window, but I could have easily wound up with one of those inside rooms and I would not have coped well. And
Mm.
so, one of the things that I love about working for myself is that if I want to change my view, if I want to change what I see in my surroundings, I can pick myself up and move myself with my laptop to another spot. I can go to a coffee shop, I can go to the library, I can go for a walk. I'll often take a walk break in the middle of the day just to see new things. I always take a different route because I want to be looking at something
Mm.
new. But yeah, it's interesting how the visual environment of what we're looking at has such an impact on
You,
maybe the
you.
inner landscape.
100%, yeah. I
Mhm,
think obviously we can see that and talk about that in terms of like nutrition, right? But I feel like it's almost the same thing because it affects
mhm,
me so much if I, even when I'm doing my yoga practice, if I can't see a tree or something, I can't see out of the window, it really affects my yoga practice. I don't feel as
mhm.
connected as I would if I was like facing a wall or something like that.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, most of the yoga spaces I've practiced in have been windowless rooms.
Oh,
Interesting.
really?
Yeah.
Strange, isn't it, really, when you think about the concept of yoga?
Yeah, it is. Or like those like mirror rooms
Oh yeah, I don't
or
like
what
the
have you.
mirrored rooms.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always attributed my need for window to I'm direct light, and I have always attributed
Definitely.
it to that. But it's true that it is also obviously external vision. We have some windows, all of our east-west windows face onto other people's stucco. It's a challenge for me to have a window that looks on nothing. I wouldn't do well in New York City brownstone situation because
No,
I need the
no.
window to be showing something.
Yeah. Also, I've definitely recognized, like, going on a bit of a segue, I'm Valley, so like you said about New York, if I'm in a high rise somewhere that and it's quite, like there's lots of buildings or things like that, I can't really see anything, but also being higher up is not good for me as a valleys person. I need also that wide expanse as well.
Hmm. Yeah, you would do well where I live in the middle of Canada, where everything is flat and you can see
Yes,
forever in all directions.
absolutely. I love that.
Well, thanks for joining me on all the tangents and explorations of different aspects of your design, specifically being 824. We'll flow now into our closing ritual of drawing an affirmation card. These cards are created by Christina from Glow Juice HD, and I'm holding the 2-4 cards in my hand here. So when you're ready, take a deep breath in together and let that go. The card I've drawn today is I trust my natural gifts and talents. Do I recognize what comes naturally to me as a valuable asset? So we talked about this.
Yeah.
Is there anything that makes it particularly resonant for you right now or today?
Yeah, because I'm currently in one of those cycles where I'm not seeing my natural gifts. And I've definitely noticed it over the past few days where I've been like, okay, how can we figure this out now? What do we need to do next? So, absolutely.
For listeners who would like to get in touch with you and follow along, where can they connect with you?
So, you can find me on my website, which is charlottewright.co. And I'm also charlottewright.co on Instagram, which is mostly where I hang out, to be honest with you. Yeah, also on LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. But yeah, mostly on my website and Instagram.